And thank you all for joining us today. Welcome to the Outsmart Cyberthreats Before They Strike webinar with CDW and WatchGuard. We're excited to be joined by Stefan, who will be leading today's presentation and sharing some valuable insights on how to stay ahead of evolving cyber threats. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to pop it in the chat. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Stefan, to get us started.
Excellent. Well, thank you, and thank you to everybody who's made the time to join us today. As we discussed, I'll be talking about really some new emergent technologies when it comes to network security specifically, and our product specifically we'll focus on is ThreatSync NDR, our network detection and response solution here at WatchGuard Technologies. And so, if you're unfamiliar with WatchGuard, we've been in the network security side of the business for over 30 years, since 1996. Really, one of the first firewall vendors, but have evolved our business and our portfolio to really have a platform story, right? Covering everything from endpoint security to those firewalls to multi-factor authentication. And then the advanced solution we're going to talk to you today, which is our AI-powered ThreatSync network detection and response solution. So before we get into the presentation, I just wanted to talk about the cyber realities that all of our businesses are confronting today. And that's that we're faced with very sophisticated, complex attacks. And then you look at something like ransomware as an attack vector specifically, right? The sophistication behind these types of attacks, even when they're targeting small to mid-sized enterprises, smaller organizations, the non-large enterprise businesses, right, are very sophisticated, in part because the tool sets that are in the hands of cyber actors today are that much more powerful and really drive down the barrier to entry for all of these sophisticated attack types for threat actors as they seek to target our businesses. And so I have an example of a modern ransomware breach on the screen today that I want to use to really illustrate this point. And what I want to draw your attention to start the presentation is on the right-hand side. This really timeline of the attack itself from really three phases: access, expansion, and execution. And you'll see I have this green line in the middle of this access and expansion breaking point called the boom line. And that's really driving home this concept of left and right of boom. All these activities we can do to prevent a breach on the left-hand side of boom, and those access process in that access phase, and then everything that happens after the boom, when that threat actor has entered your environment and is starting to move around and navigate to the keys to your castle, so to speak, to be more effective with their cyber attack. And so if we look at that in more detail, you see that from an access standpoint, this very often only takes a few minutes, right, to actually break into our environment. And in this example, I have users being phished, right, where they receive an email that maybe looks like a Microsoft 365 login page, says, hey, you need to update your password, it's time, your 3-month rotation period has arrived, jump in here and change your password. Right, and that user will then navigate to the page. It'll look like their normal familiar login page that they might use, and they'll enter their credentials. And that cyber attacker will capture those valid credentials through that process and then use it to actually log into your systems. And some of the more sophisticated attacks, they can actually steal the multi-factor authentication tokens behind the scenes there and use that to help them get some persistence into the environment. And so from this point, this is really right of boom. They're now within the environment, and this is when they're spending, sometimes 5 days, sometimes up to 30 days or longer, really mapping out the network environment, all the various resources, and the areas of sensitive data that might be more valuable for them to actually get into. And they'll also do things like add tools to help them maintain persistence. An example there would be OAuth applications that allow them to authenticate into other parts of the environment and use that as a tool to pivot to more sensitive locations. And throughout this process, they'll start to escalate and pivot to places to scrape emails, take team chats, steal SharePoint documents, right? Start to steal those really sensitive elements of your business data, your intellectual property, your customer data that you find more valuable. or start even encrypting some of this data to hold it ransom. And what we've actually seen is that lately, cyber actors are doing both of these, right? They're not just encrypting your data, they're actually going through the process of exfiltrating much of this data as well. And so they're really hitting you from both directions. They're saying, look, we lock down your data, we'll give it back to you if you pay this fee, or alternatively or additionally, they're saying, or we're going to publish this sensitive data on the dark web or somewhere on the internet unless you pay this ransom, right? And so they really are holding these businesses hostage from two different directions. And ultimately, a lot of the businesses who fall victim to this type of attack, they don't find out about it unless the ransomware actor themselves informs them, pops up that ransomware message and says, hey, you've been compromised. Or sometimes it's even a third party, right? A supply chain partner, another organization that detects your data on the deeper dark web, potentially, that says, hey, you've fallen victim. And that really speaks to the big challenge that network detection and response and the value that it can provide, and why it's so important to be adding to our security stacks here going forward. And that's the reduction in dwell time that's possible. What we're able to do with network detection and response is monitor all of the network behaviors, both in and out of the network, but also crucially that internal network behavior in that expansion phase I have captured here, to find attacks earlier and allow us to kill those attacks before they really go to their escalation point and start to push things like that final ransomware payload. So we're going to talk about that in some more detail throughout the presentation. And so when we talk about network detection and response, I like to use a metaphor of a security camera system, sort of that eye in the sky type of tool for our network security and really our entire computing environment. And if you think about a security camera system, let's say in an airport, right? We have security cameras that overlay all of the different hallways, the corridors, the security areas, all the gate checks, right? As folks head down to the runway or the boarding gate to get onto the plane, people are really monitored as soon as they get within the airport environment as they navigate throughout that environment, right? That's really the same type of function that a network detection response solution does. It uses artificial intelligence to monitor all of the network traffic and behavior between all of your systems internally and externally as traffic enters and leaves, as well as it communicates in between your various systems within the environment. So it's that powerful Overwatch security system that you can overlay over your entire network. And so if you look at really a definition of network detection and response, these are systems that use AI-driven analytics. So it's going to do a process of baselining your environment, finding out what normal traffic behavior looks like, and then use artificial intelligence to surface any anomalies, anything that deviates from this normal behavior and aligns with what is known as a threat behavior or something that's associated with a risk type or profile. And so this provides you really deep visibility inside of your network today. So if you have a firewall, as an example, you're getting very deep visibility and traffic in and out of that network if you have the right inspection layers activated on that tool. But when it comes to internal traffic, unless that traffic is hitting that firewall, you're not going to be seeing that. We're able to add that type of visibility with a network detection and response solution. We're able to actually inspect encrypted traffic without going through the process of decryption, right? So if you're familiar with SSL decryption or a deep packet inspection, what we're able to do with NDR and that anomaly-based detection is look at all the flow traffic and really the metadata behind these traffic patterns and use that to divine whether or not there's malicious behavior going on in those traffic patterns, which saves you some processing and power and task, but also makes it easier from privacy and compliance standpoint. And then finally, the ability to enrich all of this data with intelligence and correlation, taking the information we understand about your network, correlating it with what we understand about the endpoints and the various devices that are associated with generating this traffic, so we can have a very strong single narrative of a threat because of this correlation and because of this Overwatch network detection and response provides. And really the final point on this slide is that network detection response is the evolution of a lot of what's gone on with things like intrusion detection, network traffic analysis, really the evolution we've seen since the early or mid 80s as network traffic inspection has evolved and we've had more capabilities that we could bring to bear. And so you might be saying, okay, why is network detection and response critical? Hey, again, I have a firewall. What's important? Again, the network remains very vulnerable. Another way to understand it is cyber attackers really have to use your network to perpetrate their attack. They're going to have to navigate either your internal network or your perimeter to get to those very sensitive, valuable things to them that they want to intercede on. It's also a very complex environment, more complex than it was even 10 years ago, with things like IoT devices and other connected devices that could potentially pose a risk to our business as they operate within this environment. There's the escalated attacks themselves. I talked about ransomware, but we're seeing very sophisticated attacks that bypass the perimeter, that increase the recovery time and response burden that's required to deal with these attacks, and ultimately cause greater damage than ever before. And finally, we find that most organizations, especially in the small to mid enterprise, they simply don't have the team to be able to effectively manage the network capabilities or the network detection that they need to determine whether or not there's threats in their environment using the traditional tools and the various security layers they may have in place. A network detection and response solution, as I mentioned, overlays the entire environment and provides a very clear understanding of where you should prioritize rather than looking at individual security layers across that network. And so ultimately what it does is do things like surface network risks, helps you understand where there's maybe unauthorized devices, maybe firewall rules that are failing or unsecured ports, helps you understand where there's credential or password attacks against some of your cloud environments, looks very specifically for behaviors that are associated with ransomware, those more latent hidden threats, and then things like supply chain attacks. And finally, looking for things like data exposure. We can find evidence of movement of sensitive files, either to public clouds or open file shares, right? And again, using the same overlay and artificial intelligence tool, we can surface all these types of behaviors, right? Looking at what we call north-south detection of your traffic and east-west. So north-south in and out of your perimeter, and east-west looking at that lateral movement, that pivoting, that privilege escalation type of behavior that you can expect within the network. And so WatchGuard's network detection and response solution is what we call ThreatSync NDR. It's a cloud-based AI-powered network-centric threat detection and response solution. And as I mentioned, it really overlays your entire network using artificial intelligence to look at your traffic in and out as well as inside of the network. And again, using AI, it's able to provide 24/7 AI-powered risk and threat monitoring. So surfacing those exposures, those risks, as well as active threats on a persistent, ongoing basis. It also provides visibility into all of the devices that are operating on the network, not just the ones that are running the operating systems that you're familiar with, your Windows, your Linux, your Mac OS. All of the connected devices, be it IoT devices, connected printers, right? We're going to understand and see all the traffic from those devices and be able to apply policies to those devices. We can detect active attacks that have bypassed the perimeter and the endpoint. I think I've talked about this quite a bit. And then finally, there's this idea of a policy engine, right? So you can map your security policies, your security controls, or those of common regulatory controls for things like compliance, right, to how you're actually monitoring, reporting, and responding to threats within your environment. So you'll see where a policy has maybe violated that is a part of the traffic behaviors, where those violations occur, and you can adjust those policies and tune those policies for your specific needs. And so again, we have a very powerful artificial intelligence engine behind the scenes here that facilitates all of this. And this is really just another way to look at how this process goes, right? Well, if you look at the network traffic, right, the average organization within a week is going to generate around 3 billion network flows. This is all the type of traffic flows from your firewalls, from your routers, from your switches, all of those internal resources and that could be generating any type of traffic behavior. And through this process, the artificial intelligence is going to collect these flows, it's going to normalize these flows, enrich them with intelligence and pattern understanding, and then use that understanding to surface and detect threats. And from there, we can correlate those detected threats into really a holistic narrative of what's going on in the environment. And one of the areas where WatchGuard is a little bit different from other network detection response solution is we actually use our artificial intelligence to do that last mile of investigation. And that means it's correlating and distilling that information down into even fewer alerts. So you have that much more confidence that what you're seeing is a real threat that you should actively respond to. And the result of all of this process is we take those 3 billion weekly flows and are able to distill them down into ultimately 3 daily smart alerts. So 3 daily alerts that your team will on average have to deal with as they're operating their environment. Now you can see on the right-hand side, I have an example of here of what some of those smart alerts look like, where we can see suspicious data tunneling, probing, reconnaissance activity, those things that the artificial intelligence engine has flagged as very concerning that you want to look into based on the anomaly detection that it's established. And we have a very sophisticated threat scoring engine as well that will score based on device as well as subnet. So you, again, know where to prioritize, understand where the severity of the attacks you're seeing. And then we have the ability to do things like present this in a behavior map with your policy alerts and all the different visualizations you would expect. So again, you can understand what happened, when, and how to understand how to triage that threat even more. And just another way to really look at how this actually operates from a technical standpoint. On the top hand side here, we're taking all of our firebox or our firewall data by taking the traffic logs from those devices, or if they're third-party firewalls, taking the NetFlow, SysFlow, DHCP, VPN data, right, and feeding that into our ThreatSync artificial intelligence platform, right. We do this again through the traffic logs on the firebox themselves, or what we call collector agents, little software agents that we can deploy to take information off your networks, routers and switches, and those third-party firewalls. And this all sends it up to the artificial intelligence engine and takes you through that process I walked you through on the previous slide. But from there, it actually outputs to your team so they can go through the process of responding to threats, right? So you can block IP addresses, block device access, those type of actual responsive activities to actually prevent and block the threat from persisting in the environment. We also have the ability to run reports from this tool, right? So we have a fairly deep bench of compliance reports already built in the tool that you can use to run to understand where you have security gaps, but also what threats have been seen within a specific period of time. And those align with very common compliance NIST reports and can be customized for emergent compliance reports or even supply chain requirements as needed. And just sort of to put a finer point on this too, if you're coming from an understanding of, I have a firewall, maybe you even have a WatchGuard firebox, really what value am I getting if I add a network detection response solution, right? Again, a firebox, a WatchGuard firewall is a very powerful system for understanding the traffic that's coming in and out of your environment. So it performs things like file inspection to look for malicious payloads, very effective at stopping and controlling important protocol traffic, stopping those known threats, right? And applying a full arsenal of scanning engines, right, to understand that north-south traffic that leaves and enters your network, right? But when you talk about a network detection and response solution, this really adds a tremendous amount of internal visibility that ultimately will help you cut dwell time for those threats that get within the environment. And so that is where it really provides value. It's detecting and killing those hidden threats within the network themselves. And the key thing to understand is these solutions work very, very well together. The firewall acts as a NDR sensor, really looking at all of that north-south traffic, where the east-west traffic is handled by those routers and switches, pointing that traffic to your network detection and response solution for that further analysis. So again, the firewall and NDR solution together is a very, very powerful mutual north-south, east-west traffic approach to defending your network. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it to my colleague, Michael Cahill, who will walk us through a bit of a demo of our ThreatSync NDR solution today and talk a little bit more about it.
You got it. Thanks, Stephen. Hey, everyone. Michael Cahill here, sales engineer with WatchGuard, and working with you guys in CDW. So I will do just that. We will go through a quick demo of the actual console of what it looks like to actually see the output of and what all the results of everything that Stephen just talked about. So let me share my screen and we'll get through it here. Come on, teams. There we go. All right. So this is a console view, which is a part of our larger WatchGuard Cloud infrastructure. So if you're familiar with that at all, this is just another page within WatchGuard Cloud. So really easy to get to, and you're like 2 clicks away from just about anything within the WatchGuard environment, which makes it really easy to deal with. This particular demo is technically a click-through demo, and we do normally have a full-featured live demo to actually show the real deal, but it's having a little bit of back-end issues at the moment. But we can show you all the same stuff with this demo, so it's pretty cool. So I'll click through this. It's meant to be a guided demo, but it does have some really good little tidbits in here, so we'll talk through it. So this is what it looks like when you initially log in, known as effectively the dashboard. We'll go through this here. So it shows us what the high-level network threat score is. Which is more or less an aggregate of all the internal results that we're seeing and really the output of all the AI and policy processing that Stephen was talking about. It aggregates all of the individual subnets on the network as well as the individual nodes and machines on the network. Really, I think of it as just to give you a historical timeline here to see if there's been a big change recently and when did it change, and then we can kind of work backwards to figure out, well, why did it change? And the other locations in here will give us that answer. So from there, it does show us the total number of devices. This can be a little misleading. This doesn't necessarily mean we have 33,000 machines, but it's 33,000 unique IPs we're tracking, which does include external stuff as well. So things that internal devices are reaching out to, or the other way around, connections originating from the outside coming in. That tells us how many individual connections we're tracking. And again, mostly to be more of a trend selection. We have a little bit of a trend there to show, is it changing? Did it significantly jump up and down? And if so, why? And then some of the recent unidentified IPs. So if there's a new IP on the network that's passing a ton of data, it would stick out very obviously here. From there, we go into, still kind of in the dashboard, we go to the devices section. So this does show us the individual, kind of the highlights, if you will. So what this is really intended to show. The details include things like the device name, what that threat score is, any particular open alerts, and if so, how many. And we can click into each one of those to see those. So if there's a particular problem child, so to say, we can click into that and find out why, and it will tell us exactly why and what triggered that. So from there, we go back to more at the top here, still in the network summary and the dashboard, but this will show us more or less for the given time period. In this case, it's a week, 7 days of how much data we passed. This is not how much was moved up to the cloud as far as NDR, but this is how much actually moved through your network and how much data we tracked, the actual total volume of that. So there, the other cool thing this can do is the Discover section. This is really good at identifying rogue devices or even devices that you know of, but maybe their behavior changed. So it's every 12 hours here. Basically the ThreatSync AI runs on this to see and check Are there new subnets? Are there new servers on the network? Any new network devices? And maybe we've added or removed roles on them, and it will actually directly suggest that you add or remove a role. And you can see here, and it tells you in plain English right there in the console that we suggest that you add this role to this machine, because we're seeing in this case, or actually not, it's telling you to remove the role of Active Directory server, and this one's telling you should add. Maybe you've changed around some servers. It will detect that and advise you on that. So that's a great way to detect either rogue devices on the network or just if things have changed and maybe you've got a new server that's doing something different. You wouldn't necessarily have known that otherwise without an NDR solution in place. And then probably the coolest part in this whole thing, I think, in my opinion, is the smart alerts. And this is really kind of the bottom of the funnel, so to say, as Stephen was describing. This is really the final output of all of the AI, is really putting together as nice and neatly packaged as possible exactly what happened and getting rid of all the other noise that you don't need to deal with. So it's a smart alert, as we call them. It's really, I guess, taking all of the data, putting it together in a nice, neat package. Let's actually click on it. You can see it here. This is what one looks like. And it will tell us in real clear English exactly what the activity was, how we found it, why it's considered a threat, and what details went into actually identifying that. Right here, plain English, super easy to read. You don't have to read through a bunch of logs and figure it out yourself. This will literally tell you and what pieces of the puzzle we use to figure it out. So we click through that, and we do also graphically map it out in the behavior map and the timeline map as well. And ultimately, you can click through to get the actual underlying data that we used. So it's not just a trust us. We can actually reference the data we used, but put it in a nice, neat, easy to read solution in the behavior map and how it played out to get to this point. From there, what happens if this was a false alert or a false positive, so to say? Maybe this is network scanning going on from a perfectly legitimate source, but it looks bad depending on the behavior. But you can then feed back and tune the AI by way of closing the smart alert, and you can tell it quite literally, this is abnormal and bad. If I've since fixed it, but if it happens again, I want to know about it. Maybe it's abnormal. This doesn't normally happen, but I did it. Or this is normal activity. We expect this to happen. Don't alert on it again, and it won't badger you about it again, which is great. So that way you don't have to deal with any kind of false alerts, and it really tunes the AI to give you a lot more cleaner picture, and importantly, getting rid of any of the noise. And this is just more of the same menu that more or less tells you how to say that, and then why it's authorized, again, for the purpose of tuning the AI. So the other angle of this outside of the smart alerts is the policy alerts. And those are not unlike a firewall policy, but kind of similar. I'll show you what kind of goes into that. But point being, it's there to notify you of unauthorized or unexpected activity on the network. And it really provides a nice centralized list to review what happened. And it really allows you to set, pardon the pun, but policy for your network on what is normal, what is not, what is malicious, and what is not. And if there's any changes to the network as well, this would be really good at detecting that. This is what an actual policy looks like. It includes really the default functions of a policy, but it shows the source and destination, description in plain English, both of what it is, how it actually works, and how to tune it as well. If it's not quite doing what you want it to do, we can tweak it a little bit, and it will right here in plain English tell you exactly how to actually do that, and then what any tags are associated with it. You can really filter through these. And we do, if at all possible, try to reference the MITRE ATT&CK framework. You're familiar with that? It's a very good open source solution for matching up behaviors. It's used quite a bit on the endpoint side of the world, but we do reference these in here. So again, it's not just a trust us, it's bad. Like this is actually why it's bad. And here's the MITRE ATT&CK reference to back that up. And you can click on that and it'll actually take you directly to the MITRE ATT&CK page as well, if one is present. It will also, again, showing things in multiple ways is the overall design here. So we can show it graphically, we can show it in plain English, and we can show the underlying data that backs that up. So it's a really good way to visually see what's going on. In this case, the number of IPs and where they came from and when. Just make it real easy to see if you're catching a theme here. So that is what we have for the live demo part of it here. Again, we do have this available if you would like to see this yourself. You can click through it and see that. It's on our website. If you click this button here, we'll get you the link for that. We absolutely would be happy to get on the phone with any of you guys and do more live demos if you would like to try it out in more detail. And we absolutely can do free trials if you want to try it yourself, and a full-blown POC as well. So we're here to help you and assist with that and make your life easy. And again, if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to your account rep and or us here at the WatchGuard team, and we can absolutely answer any additional questions you have. So that's that, Stephen, for the live demo part.
Fantastic. Thank you, Michael. I think that went really well. Thank you very much. Let me just bring us back here, and I think we'll take a little bit of time and see if anybody has any questions on the call. I know, I thank you, Michael. I saw you jumped in and responded to one. Just for the benefit of the team, somebody asked, does NDR affect the WatchGuard performance? So just to be clear here, we're not really burdening the firewall by adding NDR, right? It's pointing the firewall logs to a cloud server, so you don't really have any impact on your traffic throughput or anything like that from an NDR perspective. One of the nice things here too is a lot of the competitive NDR solutions would require you to have an additional piece of hardware, a dedicated appliance for an NDR solution, as an example. Our approach, you can use your existing WatchGuard Firebox. Again, it's a cloud service, but it's really just pointing that solution to the cloud, right? And we also support third-party firewalls for the same thing from a telemetry perspective. So you can get visibility, as an example, for into the Fortinet FortiGate appliances as well and their traffic behaviors. So yeah, happy to answer any additional questions we may have if you just wanted to drop them in the chat.
And to highlight and back up, Steve was saying there, we more or less can ingest, I like to say, anything at all that is NetFlow related. We can also pull in DHCP logs and telemetry from your local servers as well. So if it's any device at all, whether that be another firewall, WatchGuard firewall, third-party firewall, switch, a router, if it outputs NetFlow, we can pull it in and run all this fancy AI we were just talking about on it. So it can be really pretty much any network device at all that'll output NetFlow.
Nice. All right. Well, I don't see any questions coming in, so I just want to thank everybody very much again for attending. I'd like to get in front and share what we're doing here at WatchGuard. So hopefully you found this valuable. And as Michael said, if you do have any questions, you want to see a deeper demo, start a trial, please reach out. We'd love to get started with you guys and show you what we're doing here. So again, thank you very much for your attendance, and we'll see you next time.